And with that, I would like to introduce Susan Gilliland, who will introduce our speaker for the night. Susan?
Thank you, Ron. Well, it's our pleasure to host Larry Allen as our speaker tonight. Larry is likely a familiar face to many of you in the Southern California birding community, and you probably have already been out birding with him, looking at gulls, shorebirds, and of course, parrots. But you may not know that Larry studied economics as a graduate student at Harvard University. Though being a true native Southern Californian, Larry was not a big fan of the long, cold winters. So as soon as he could, Larry returned to his native Los Angeles, where he enjoys birding on sunny winter days and listening to early music. And early, meaning music from the late 1500s to 1700. In fact, Larry has been and continues to be very active in several early music organizations, including the Early Music Society of Southern California, Joyce-Dance, and Tesserae. When it comes to birds, Larry is well known as one of the authors and driving forces of the Los Angeles Breeding Bird Atlas. Larry has also done extensive work on the status and distribution of gulls, little gray birds of the desert, and of course, the famous parrots who now reside in Southern California, whether you like it or not. Though non-native, several species of Amazona parrots are a familiar sight in many of our neighborhoods, as the parrots have been introduced one way or another by people and have established naturalized populations in urban habitats that are often dominated by non-native plants that provide year-round food supply for the parrots. So without further ado, please welcome Larry Allen as we learn more about the parrots of Southern California.
Well, thank you for those very kind words, Susan, and welcome to all of you out in Zoom land to a little journey to explore some of the birds of urban Tropicana, the parrots of Southern California. Parrots, as you might know, come in a variety of names, such as you see here, and in sizes ranging from almost a meter long macaw to a parrotlet that is something the size you can hold in your hand. But beneath the feathers and scaled for size, of course, they're pretty much all alike. The musculature is alike, the osteology is alike, and even their life habit traits are very substantially the same. And so when we talk about parrots and parakeets, I'm not going to keep using that phrase. I'm going to use the word parrots to encompass all these birds and more. There are roughly 350 species of these things, but they're all in the same avian order, the Psittaciformes. And with that caveat, we'll proceed. So there are three physical attributes that combined make a parrot, and the order of parrots is pretty much a distinct order. There's no borderline cases. It's either a parrot or not a parrot. So what do we look for? Can people see my cursor? I hope. On the right-hand bird, you're looking, I'm circling the very pale bill. Not all bills are pale, but these deep, strongly decurved pointed bill is unique. The fleshy cere above that bill, and the zygodactyl feet. Zygodactyl meaning there's two toes pointing forward, two toes pointing backwards. You can also see that in the photo on the left. As a point of interest, a lot of parrots are left-footed as well. In addition to these shared physical characteristics, they share life history traits. They are frugivores. They all are cavity nesters. They eat and climb with the aid of their feet. And I mentioned they tend to be left-footed. Now, if you are a taxonomist, your business is trying to fit organisms in lists, if you will, of closer and farther relationships. And parrots have caused a problem to taxonomists through the decades, even almost centuries, because they don't really resemble anything else in the avian class. Some taxonomists have looked at the bill and said, well, they might be close to raptors, but that doesn't quite fit because the musculature of the bill and the mandibles and the tongue, for example, are different. Some say that zygodactyl feet might make them relatives of turquoise. Well, that's as good as any, or woodpeckers also having zygodactyl feet, but the tendons, I understand, on woodpeckers are a slightly different arrangement. So with all those proposed affinities, there's not been a lot of progress, and this statement at the top is also echoed by many commentators on the order of parrots here. However, since the turn of the millennium, we now have tools to look at both mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA, which gives a lot more hint as to the deeper affinities of the parrots. And surprise, parrots are a sister clade to the passerines. This schematic follows Hackett, but all those three references pretty much came to the same conclusion. A clade, let's go back, a clade is a group of organisms all descended from a common ancestor, and the term includes that common ancestor. So a sister clade would be two independent clades which themselves share a common ancestor. So if you can see toward the bottom of your screen, the passerines and the Psittaciformes form sister clades. Here's the branching point. And there's actually 4 orders of birds that are very close. Siriemes are endemic to South America. They're almost bustard-like ground-dwelling birds, very different from any of these others. They're all very different from each other, but the genetics indicate that they are all they've all descended from one common ancestor, and it's a different common ancestor than all the other core land birds descended from, such as woodpeckers and owls and hawks. Those are all things that are one time thought to be closely related to parrots, and they're far removed. A lot of what am I trying to say? A lot of branching between these land birds, the so-called core land birds, and things like pigeons and doves and cuckoos and turquoise, which are branched off way early in the scheme. Now, early and late is very relative, because these 4 splits right here might have occurred just after the end Cretaceous extinction, and there are people that think that the Psittaciformes were actually split before the end Cretaceous extinction event. So there's some controversy, but all these are very old lineages, but they split from other avian lineages even longer ago than that. And if the position of the parrots within the class Aves is a mystery, so too is the family relationships. This schematic here is from the Handbook of Birds of the World. They recognize 2 families within the order. Sibley and Alquist, writing in the 1990s, says we're of the opinion that there was not enough data to split any of these into separate family. They recognize one large family. Other authors have recognized as many as 11 families within the order, and indeed the AOU, looking at just the parrots that are in the AOU area, recognize at least 2 families, well, more than 2, because they recognize the New World parrots and parakeets as a separate family, and the Afrotropical parrots and parakeets as another family. So presumably they're recognizing implicitly a lot of other families as well. So let's look at how these birds got here and how they make their living here very briefly. The first question, how they got here, can be answered in a broad brush way very easily. They were brought here in cages. They're all captive, imported into the United States, into North America. None of them got here under their own wing power. The dates of these, the earliest captive parrots, of course, lost in history. But you might imagine that as long as they've been in captive, they've been escaping. And you can see on the right, the first record of a free-flying parrot in, turns out my hometown of Altadena, is almost a century old. 3/4 of a century ago, there's a record of nesting, free-flying parrots, in this case, parakeets, rose-winged parakeets. And by 50 years ago, there were, for that time, sizable flocks of parrots in the western San Gabriel Valley, which, by the way, which is still the center of distribution for the biggest parrot flocks in Southern California. So how can they possibly make their living in habitat like this? Well, I should mention, first of all, that the parrots that are doing the best in Southern California are temperate birds. They either come from temperate latitudes or from higher elevation areas in tropical latitudes. So they're predisposed, forget the term I want right now, but in any event, they're well adapted to the very temperate, mild climate of Southern California. They don't need tropical rainforests, for example. So I'm indebted to Kimball Garrett not only for the use of his slide here, but also for the observation that to a parrot, this suburban area rather looks like a savanna. You've got trees that support shelter. They provide food. They provide nesting substrate, and separating these trees is large areas of uninteresting, useless habitat that they can fly over to get to the next area of habitat that they can utilize. Now, despite their being exclusively frugivores, they can exploit a wide range of food, and these foods are provided by a wide range of non-native plants, both cultivated and sometimes naturalized trees. For example, they eat fruit and berries, they eat seeds and nuts, they eat flowers, they eat leaves and leaf buds, especially buds from deciduous trees that are just budding out in the spring. They also make use of cedars, feeders that people set up. So you've got a wide variety of food possibilities. On the far right, I've summarized some of the more important and heavily used tree species used by these parrots. This list was compiled by Kimball Garrett and colleagues in the 70s. But you'll notice the take home here is that almost the vast majority of tree species utilized are non-native species. So they're not really burdening the native species as much as they are burdening the non-natives for their food requirements. And I don't know whether I've mentioned the word naturalized before, but we're talking about naturalized parrots. These are parrots. A naturalized species is an organism that has been introduced to an area outside of its native range and is self-sustaining. It does not need any kind of pattern of releases to maintain its population levels. Its population levels are maintained through natural recruitment from nesting activities. Now, if you've been involved in breeding bird atlases, you know that documenting cavity nests are really hard. but parrots give us an advantage in documenting their reproductive success, in that in the non-breeding season, they form big roosting flocks in the evening. And so if you go out anytime after August through this time of year, you're going to see a lot of immature individuals, hatch-year individuals, accompanying or even being attended by adults. So we can demonstrate breeding, even though we don't know precisely where that breeding was in terms of the actual nest location or nest substrate or anything like that. But we know that they are very successful in breeding here. But of course, as the advertisement on the bottom shows, they're still escaping too. So I talked about what it means to be a naturalized organism. I used data from the 3 published breeding bird atlases in Southern California. They documented all but one of the species I'm going to talk about, documented breeding from all but one of the species. The last species were documented by the San Diego County Avian Records database, which is a supplement for observation after the publication of the San Diego County Bird Atlas. That's probably an idea for LA County as well, but here's not the time to go into that. You can see the area of Southern California where these birds are most likely to be found. I did use eBird for a lot of the data on the current distribution, but if you do use eBird to find out where these things are, be aware that these are cage birds, and sometimes they escape. And so some of these observations, I suspect, are one-time unique observations and of an escaped bird, and they will then disappear from wherever they were first seen. They might join a big flock, they might not make it at all. So you need to look for a pattern of occurrence before you can discern where best to go chasing a particular species that you might be interested in. Bottom line, I'm going to address 14 species tonight, 6 of them parrots in the strict sense, with parrot in their name, and then the other 14 parakeets. Excuse me. Back in the dark days, before the internet and before digital photographs, I and other members of the California Parrot Project would get calls from residents saying, "There's a parrot in my backyard. What is it?" "Well, what's it look like?" "It's green." Okay, well, they're all green. Tell me something more. So you got this green bird in your backyard. What do you look for? Okay, first thing, look at the tail. You're not looking at any really field marks on the tail, but you're looking for the relative tail length. Is it long and pointed, what we call graduated? You can see the outer tail feathers are progressively shorter, so it makes a nice pointed tail. Or is it pretty much a uniform, it's a flat tail squared off and relatively wide? If it's got the pointed tail, it's a parakeet. At least that's what they tend to be called. If it's got a square tail, it's going to be called a parrot, at least as far as the birds we have in Southern California. Now that you've figured that out, you can almost ignore it. You go to the head, and we're only talking 14 species here. You can discern the exact specific affinity by looking only at the head if you want. What are you going to see on the head? Well, you're going to see a very prominent beak. Some are very pale, some are almost black, some are black. You're going to look for the cere right above the beak and its color. You'll notice eye rings, sometimes very prominent, sometimes not prominent at all. And you're going to get a variety of colors in a variety of patterns. The colors you're likely to see are red, yellow, blue, in a couple cases white. And then the green of the body will be extending up into the head as well. The cheek feathering may be a little bit a brighter green than the rest of the plumage, as it is here on the right-hand bird. You may have a hard to define red area, for example, on this mitered parakeet, but pretty much the head pattern and associated colors will tell you what the bird is. But you're looking at birds. We're bird watchers, right? We like to look at birds. So look at the rest of the bird too. Notice on the body, there might be color at the bend of the wing. There might be color further on down on the wing. There may or may not be patches of color on the feathering around the tarsi. The breast feathers may have a scalloped appearance, or they may not. The undertail coverts may have some color in them. The primary tips may be green, or they may be some shade of blue or purplish blue even. That's often the case. And then if you want to, you can get back, circle right back to the tail. Does the tail itself have any colors in it? Are any of the retrices a different color, or is there a band on the tail? Or does the undertail have a slightly different color, a contrasty color than the body? So that's the kind of thing you want to look at when you're looking at a parrot or parakeet. So we've been looking at the bird on the right. We might as well identify it as a red crown parrot. It is by far the default parrot in Southern California. It has by far the greatest numbers of any of our naturalized species. It's moderately sized, and we can use that as a kind of a comparison point for other species that we're going to be talking about tonight. A little over a foot long if you're used to dealing in American units. So what do we see? We see a pale bill. We see a pale sear. We have a pale eye ring, a little almost white. And we also see red on the forehead coming up over the crown. We see blue aft of that. We see a really bright green patch on the cheek. By the way, that's the translation. Green cheek is the translation of the Latin specific epithet there. What else do we see? As we go toward the body, we see kind of a scaly appearance to the breast feathering. We see this big patch of red down here. This is actually the outer secondaries that are red, and they are not only red in the red crowned parrot. I think indeed every naturalized parrot in Southern California does have red in the outer secondaries. So you'll see a patch much like that in all of them. The other thing we look at is the primary tips are green, about the same shade of the body. There's no contrast there. The tail is of moderate length, not particularly long, not particularly short. So we're going to use this tail length as sort of a standard against which we judge other naturalized parrots as well. A word about the map. Juniper and Parr use the trade names, the pet trade names for the birds where we're using the approved ornithological names by the AOS right now, as it is. So if you ever decide you want to acquire one of these loud and sometimes obnoxious birds, that's what you ask for in the pet store. And you can see it's from the eastern montane, the Cordillera Oriental of Mexico. Okay, we did talk about all those features. So getting back to its distribution in Southern California, widespread in the coastal slope of Los Angeles and Orange counties, also into Ventura County, also a goodly population in around the city of San Diego, and routinely reported in San Bernardino County and northern San Diego County. There are little scatterings of reports all over, but these are the main areas of distribution, and there are a number of flocks certainly in the southern the Cismontane region of Los Angeles County, a number of independent flocks in the San Fernando Valley, San Gabriel Valley, west side, Malibu area on into some of Ventura County as well. And of course, northern and central Orange County. So very, very widespread. A word about the recordings before I get to this specific recording. All my recordings are from Zeno Canto. It's just an invaluable reference to people like me, and my hat's off to people contributing sounds to those archives. Secondly, I have attempted to, wherever possible, to find recordings of our naturalized species. I'm sure you're aware that parrots, in addition to, there's only 3 kinds of birds that can learn songs that they're not innate: hummingbirds, parrots, and the Osine passerines. Other than that, all other orders of birds, the calls are innate, calls and vocalizations. Parrots learn them, and so that's a problem because there's no a priori reason that the calls, the vocalization of our naturalized parrots here would be anything like the calls, the vocalizations in the native range. So I've tried to find naturalized populations to give you a better sense of what the calls are, in hopes of giving you a better sense of what the calls are like. I could not find a call with the characteristic descending whinny that this bird often utters. But other than that, Lance has done a great job of catching the chack, 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 chack of this species. Just real quickly to give you an idea of what's going on with that red patch you see in the wing. These are the outer secondaries, and when folded, that's that red patch that you see on the folded wing. Lilac crown parrot is far less common than the red crown parrot. Maybe 10%, 15% maximum of the population, I suspect. Very close in size, and just nominally the same color pattern, but not quite. Notice that the red does not come up over the crown. It is just restricted to an area on the fronds in front of the crown, and it's more of maroon than the sort of fire engine red of the red crown. And the violet comes up and over the forehead, the crown, and around the auricular region. Looking a little bit more closely, we've still got that pale bill, but notice that the cere is dark. Notice too that the eye ring is dark. Getting away from the head, it's got that patch of red in the secondaries, but look at the primary tips. They're they're dark blue. They're not green. Other things you can look for is the scaling on the breast. There are some authorities that say this species has a lot more scaling on the breast than does the red crown. I personally think there's enough overlap that I don't rely on that look at all, or if I do, it's something very, very secondary that I might point out to myself, but it's nothing I would ever rely on. And the tail length is longer in proportion on the lilac crown. Well, longer, absolutely, I suspect. So it's a long-tailed experience, affect, but without a lot of experience, it's hard to judge on a single bird. But you can, if you got a good look at the head and can get a good sense of the quality of red in the fronds here, It's a lilac crowned, and a very young red crown might have the red restricted to this area, which is a caution, but it won't be this quality of maroon. And you can see it is from the opposite coast of Mexico. Did we talk about the field marks? Yes, I remembered everything. This is pretty much the same distribution map as I gave you for the red crown. The ranges are really coextensive in the Southland here, but it's just that the numbers are much fewer. So you've got to search them out a little bit more. Ooh, one thing I forgot to mention. In the field, I couldn't find a photo that really emphasized, but in the field, the lilac crown parrots have a slightly larger look to the head, and the crown looks flatter than the more domed crown of a red crown. It's a subtle, but that's one of the things I look for if I've got a tree full of parrots. Just look at the heads, look at the shape of the head. If I see a flat crown and a relatively big head, I'll key in and verify that it's a lilac crown. So it's a pretty consistent field mark, but it's hard to describe, and I couldn't find any pictures of it. And the Lance here has also got these recordings from Altadena, and they're a higher pitch kind of eek 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 than the chack of the red crown. And of course, nothing is simple. These two species have been known to hybridize for decades. And here's a hybrid found by Andy Birch not that long ago. On first impression, you'd say, hey, there's a lilac crown, and just move along. But Andy noticed that it was a little bit different. What's different about it? Well, the quality of red in the fronds is not as maroon as you might expect on a lilac crown. Here's a putative red crown for comparison, and they're pretty close. The wingtips are green as in a red crown, and not as in a purplish blue as in a lilac crown. What else? Look a little bit closer. The cere is pale, but the eye ring is dark. So you've got this mixture, some of which are the characteristics of one versus the other, and some characteristics are kind of blends. So if you might think of it, some characters are more Mendelian, short P, long P thing. It's either all one or all the other of the parent birds, and some are sort of blends, mixtures. So just be alive to the fact that there are hybrids, and they can be told apart, but you've got to pay attention. Yellow-headed is probably the next most common bird we have, parrot we have in Southern California, although largely restricted to LA County, and by less common, even an order of magnitude, maybe 2 orders of magnitude, less than even the lilac crown. But they are around. Yellow-headed is a good term for them. The yellow goes all the way over the crown of the head down to the well into the cheek and to the nape of the neck. Bright pink bill and a pink cere, white orbital ring, and it looks as if the eye is dark, but I think the iris is a red. I think we're largely seeing pupil there. And these are big birds, bigger than the red crowned, and so they're easy to pick out for that reason, because they also like to stick in the tops of the tree, whatever trees they're in. So if you got a tree full of hundreds of birds and there's a few yellow-headeds there, they'll be on top. So they're easy to find. and easy to identify. But you can also look at the color at the bend of the wing, both red and yellow at the bend of the wing are obligatory, almost outer secondaries, and traces of yellow elsewhere in the plumage. They're from a little bit southerly than the distribution of our native distributions of our other two parrots, the other two that I talked about. Yes, so the center of distribution of these in LA County, at least, is the Western San Gabriel Valley and really Pasadena, South Pasadena area. My high count right before the shutdown was approaching 40 birds one day out of a flock of maybe 1,000 parrots of all kinds. But you get routine reports from elsewhere in Los Angeles, Orange counties, and also San Diego counties, both in the city of San Diego proper and south of there as well. I could not find a recording of our from one of our naturalized populations, but this recording I think really captures well the sort of hollow, quavery "ow, ow, ow" that this bird utters. And by the way, they utter it in flight as well as perch, maybe even more often in flight. Now I want to address this bird for a reasonably obvious in a minute or two. This is the turquoise-fronted parrot. It used to be called the blue-fronted parrot. They are, if anything, it might be slightly larger than our yellow-headed parrot. And at first glance, you might mistake it for a young yellow-headed parrot with this big patch of yellow surrounding the eye and up over the crown. But you'll notice that the area above the bill is I guess it's turquoise, if I'm to believe the name. Also notice that the bill and cere are black and not pale as in the previous examples. Other than that, it looks a lot like the other parrots we might see with our patch of red in the secondaries, our deep blue, almost purplish primary tips, and a trace of color at the bend of the wing as well. There you can see the color at the bend of the wing a lot better, and maybe even a better look at the blue area above the bill. These used to be more common than I think they are now. I'm used to seeing them in the flocks in the Pasadena Temple City area of Los Angeles. They're not often reported, and with that, to me the sound of the birds, the vocalizations, really echoic of the yellow-headed, but not as quavery, but still a wow, wow, wow. So our next problem area, the reason I wanted to address that relatively rare bird before some of the more common ones is that they hybridize with yellow-headed. You can read the text at the bottom of the page and get an idea of why they might be hybridizing. These photos are from Loretta Erickson and Mike Bowles, who hide behind the website Amazonia US. They've been really kind to provide me a lot of photos over the years. I'm really indebted to them. And they have been following a mixed species pair for years. The female is a yellow-headed, the male is a turquoise-fronted, and these birds on this page are all progeny of that pair. The one on the upper right looks, first glance would look like a yellow-headed, and then you would see the bill and you say, ooh, something is going on here. But you don't see any blue, so you might not guess that it was one of the parents was a turquoise-fronted, unless you happen to be following that mixed species couple and pair, I should say, and were following the nestlings as well. The birds on the left are also from a different year, but from the same pair. You can see the beaks are kind of smudgy, not all black as in the right-hand bird, but you can also see that there's maybe a tad of bluish or turquoise in the right-hand lower bird right there. So again, we have an example of hybrids that are not all the same, even though they're from the same parents. Bottom right is another bird from that same pair. I look at it and I would say it's a yellow-headed parrot, no doubt. But yet we know, well, we don't know because there could have been an extra pair copulation going on, but the probabilities are that this is a chick from that mixed species pair. And this gives us caution when the prospect of stalking declining endangered native populations with the same birds from urban populations. Absent some kind of genetic test, you would not know that you might be introducing a hybrid gene swarm into what was formerly a pure and endangered, now endangered population. So you got to be really cautious. We have to be really cautious when we talk about using naturalized birds as sources for birds in trouble elsewhere. Let's get back to something a little bit more common, the red Lord Parrot, again, about the size of our red crown. And if you're looking up at the trees, you're not going to notice the red lords. What you're really going to notice is those yellow cheeks. That's the first thing you notice. And then you say, then you look at the lord and say, oh yeah, red lord. But most noticeable at first is the yellow cheek on a bird about the size of a red crown parrot. The arrangement of red on the head is more like that of a lilac crown, with just the forehead red, blue over the crown, but indeed the lores are red. That two-tone bill you're seeing, I understand, is a characteristic of the nominant race. There are four known subspecies, or four recognized subspecies of red Lord Parrot, but it seems to be the nominant race. A little bit better view of that bird. They do tend to have the red on the secondary is completely hidden here, and there is some color around the bend of the wing. They are pretty routinely found, but not in numbers. You know, a pair, two pairs maybe in a big flock of hundreds of other parrots. San Gabriel Valley, western San Gabriel Valley, the easterly San Fernando Valley, and then scattered reports elsewhere, including Riverside County, Orange County, and San Diego County. So they're not at all common, but findable with some luck. Again, a recording from its native range. I couldn't find a naturalized recording of a naturalized bird. I'm not sure I would recognize that squeaky little call if I were to hear it outside my door, but I would recognize that it's not one of the more abundant parrots around. White-fronted parrot is really the smallest of our naturalized parrots, and I should probably put naturalized in quotes. We'll get to that in a minute. The name is actually a handy mnemonic aid for this bird. It does have a white front, a lot of contrasting colors. It's actually kind of a pretty bird with that bright pink bill, red around the eye, nice blue color on the crown, and then a lot of red in the wing and the bluish primary tips. I think you can see, maybe not, there's also red in the outer rectrix. There's another shot of one. I haven't seen these birds in a long time, like a decade. Not to say they haven't been seen by others, but I couldn't find any recent reports of them either. So I'm not sure whether or not we still have a population of white-fronted parrots or not. I've only seen 2 at a time ever, and it could be that the founding population was just too small to be self-sustaining, or it got genetically swamped by mixed species mating, things like that happen. This photo is from Loretta and Mike, and they operate out of Orange County. I'm not sure whether this is an Orange County bird or not, but so it could be from Orange County, and it could be there's at one time a few birds down there as well, but nothing recent. Let's get to a recording real fast here. Maybe a bit more nasal than the lilac crowned, but rather reminiscent to that, I think. There's another picture of white-fronted, and you can see the red in the outer retrostate there. Now we come to parakeets. The yellow chevron is the smallest of our parakeets. It was split from canary wing parakeet some years ago. The yellow chevron, again, gives you a good handle on this bird. They all have a big slash of yellow in the wing. This is actually the secondary coverts, or primary coverts, I think. Both coverts, I think. I'm not sure which one we're seeing right there. But other than that, it's pretty much all green, nice pink bill, prominent white eye ring, and pay attention to the head because the lores are green, pretty much as green as the rest of the body, and not a lot of contrast in the wings themselves, the primary tips. Another view of it with the eye ring a little bit more prominent. They're all throughout the LA basin and also in the western San Fernando Valley, northern Orange County. Pretty widespread birds. I couldn't find a recording of the local ones, but this one is from the naturalized population in Florida. The other half of that, the former canary wing parakeet that was split, is also here, but it's never been here in very, very good numbers. The white wing parakeet does indeed have white in the wing. These are the, I think, the greater coverts, and then also there's white in the inner primaries and secondaries as well. But that white is often hard to see. So look at the head, and you'll notice that in contrast with the yellow chevron parakeet, this bird has gray lores, an indiscernible eye ring, but it shares the pink bill. Sometimes this gray can come up over the crown or surround the eye. So it's very, very easily discernible, even if you cannot see the white in the wing. If you can see the white in the wing in flight, it's really obvious, of course. And the primary tips are perhaps a little darker than the primary tips of the canary wing. This used to be never terribly common, but more widespread in the South Bay, Palos Verdes Peninsula area of LA County. They've disappeared, pretty much disappeared during the 90s, but there are still reports. There's been a flurry of reports from Huntington Park earlier this year. They sound a little bit different than the canary wing. Squeaky almost. They too hybridize. These pictures are all from Florida, and I wouldn't expect every hybrid to look like the one on the bottom, just like we saw that not every hybrid yellow-headed turquoise-fronted looked the same. Now, I would expect that if white-winged parakeets are breeding in LA County, there will be hybrids. We have such a population imbalance with just a handful of white wing, hundreds, maybe over 1,000 canary wings. The white wings are going to have very limited mate choice, and it would be not unheard of biologically for the rarer bird to pair with a mate of a congeneric bird, very common. So if you think you've seen a white-winged parakeet in LA County, check very, very closely and see if you can find any signs of hybridization of that bird. I think we would all be interested. Mitered parakeet really compete with yellow chevron for the most abundant parakeet, certainly in LA County, but in Southern California, they are clearly more common because their range extends much more extensively into other counties as well. Big birds, but they're good 40% of them's tail, so they are actually longer than, say, a red crown. What do we see on this bird? Well, we see a orangey pink bill. We see a really prominent eye ring, and otherwise we see this messy red color over the head and down through the neck with scattered red feathers elsewhere in the body. Not neat and clean at all. The primary tips seem to they tend to be about the same color as the rest of the bird. So there's not a lot to look at except that it's a messy red. Here's a couple more birds to show the variation. And not only is it not neat, they're not all the same either. You can see this one has red in the feathering of the tarsus. It looks like blue, but I think that's an artifact. The primary tips are pretty much the same color. When perched vertically, as they often do toward the end of the day, the undertails look kind of almost a yellowish tinge to them. That's very common. And again, you can see the variation in the amount of red in the body. All throughout the LA Basin, the Western San Gabriel Valley, I think the San Fernando Valley. There's also a population out toward Point Dume and the Zuma Creek area in the Malibu area. Again, a set of calls from Florida, but these calls are the same as I recall from here. Red mask parakeet is very close both in size and genetically to the mitered parakeet. Main difference is The red on the head is much more neat, as it were. They don't have an exact clean-cut mask the way perhaps a Bonaparte skull might have, but it's still ragged around the edge, but it's still very much concentrated and a nice even red throughout the head. The other thing you want to look for is red at the bend of the wings. This red extends a little bit into the underwing coverts, so in flight you can see if it has red at the leading edge of the wing, it's going to be a red mask parakeet and not a mitered parakeet above you. Other than that, pretty much the same. The primary tips are green, tails green. Again, another shot. I wanted to point out that some of these birds have red going down to the chin as well. By the way, if you've ever seen what was a very popular movie maybe a couple of decades ago called The Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill, these are the parrots. They're red mask parakeets. I used to see these in the big flocks of parrots and mitered parrots in Temple City. And when that flock moved to Pasadena 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, the mitered and the red mask did not come with them. So the red mask, it took me a while to figure out where the miters went. And it's taken me longer to find, well, actually I have yet to find the roosts of the red mask parakeet, the evening roost, but there's a lot of reports from out in the Claremont area. But I see an occasional one or two red masks in flocks of mitered parakeets in the Temple City area. And they're also down in the city of San Diego in some numbers, and this recording is from San Diego. I'm going to confess my own failing here. I can't really tell the difference, especially if I'm on the street somewhere listening to them. I really can't tell the difference in their calls. Nandy parakeets are unmistakable with that all black head, beautiful blue in the wings and tail, and the red and yellow pantaloons, if you want to call them. They're from South America, as you can see. The photo on the upper right here gives you a little bit better feel for the overall proportions of the birds. That blue in the chest, the breast area, indicates it's an adult. The hatchier birds will not have that blue. They are occasionally found in the amongst the parakeet flocks in the western San Gabriel Valley, but their real center of distribution is the Santa Monica Mountains. Both flanks of those mountains extending to Hollywood Hills in the east and well into Ventura County on the west. There's a lot of them. They've really increased in numbers in the last couple of decades. So they're now pretty easy to find out there. And the calls are not all that distinctive, but you know you've got a parakeet and not a parrot when you're hearing this. Another really unmistakable bird is a rose-ring parakeet. It's probably our largest parrot in overall dimension, although most of that is tail. It has the longest tail proportionally of any of our parakeets. It's our only old world parakeet. There are 2 disjunct populations, and each have 2 subspecies. So I think nobody is quite sure where are the geographic origin of our current rose-ringed parakeets are. They're aptly named. There is a rosy suffusion around the black ring that circles this bird's neck. But the most obvious point that you're going to see is that bright red bill, the bright red orbital ring there. Also note that a lot of these birds have a black chin. They also have a black, I guess you'd call it a preocular line extending from the lores up over the bill to the other loral area. Other than that, they're pretty uniform green, but unmistakable when you see it in the wild, and they're big enough that you will see them if they're around. Another view of that, especially of the rosy area around the neck. This bird may indeed have a black lower mandible, and there is a subspecific difference between the birds with red lower mandibles and the birds with black lower mandibles. And I forget what the geographic origin of each of those is. My apologies. And my guess is there may be enough mixtures by now that it's impossible to tell. Occasionally seen in the San Gabriel Valley, but the center of distribution for these birds is Playa del Rey, Santa Monica, perhaps Pacific Palisades area in Los Angeles County, and the city of San Diego, a little bit north of the bay in San Diego County. But that's just Southern California. The real center of population of these birds is Bakersfield. At one time they had well over 1,000 birds. I'm not sure whether that population is maintained, but they have a lot of rose-ringed parakeets, and these recordings are from Bakersfield. The first, I think, is a single bird, and the second is a flock. Blue-crowned parakeets were once at least findable in the flocks in Temple City, but I haven't seen those for a year. They are a big bird. They're almost as big, as you can see by the dimensions, as the rose-ringed parakeets, but they're a much bulkier bird. The blue crown, I would have named this blue-headed parakeet, but there's as you can see, there's a suffusion of blue over much of the head of these birds. They used to be in the same genus as the mitered parakeet and the red mask parakeet, and you can kind of see they have the overall dimensions of those birds, the proportions, I should say, and also such features as the pink bill, very evident white eye ring. But they do differ in that the undertails have this reddish or orangey suffusion to them, as opposed to maybe the yellow look of a mitered parakeet. Here's one with a red mask parakeet for comparison. Just notice how much bigger the blue crown parakeet is than the red mask parakeet. These are really big parakeets. I mentioned that I have not seen one in the parakeet flocks in recent years in LA County, but there are regularly reported in the city of San Diego. So you might want to go down there if you want one for your California list. This slide, I'm only putting it in because these are red-crowned parrots, and this is our blue-headed parakeet. It's almost got the body size of the red red crown parrot, and certainly the overall dimensions are much larger. Now here's a recording from one of the San Diego birds. Maybe a slightly different quality than the calls of the mitered and red mask, but I'd hate to be faced with that in some sort of oral bird quiz and have to pick it out. I'm not sure I could. Monk parakeet. This is the bird not documented in any of the breeding bird atlases, but it is documented on the San Diego avian database. It was first documented as breeding on that database. Rather smallish for a parakeet, but unmistakable with that whitish gray crown and underside, nice orangey bill and rather pretty blue primary tips. Its native range is South America, but it has been introduced all over the world. And it is managing to survive in quite cold climates. For example, in North America, this is Chicago, this is New York, and maybe even Buffalo or someplace like that. Northern Europe, it gets cold there. Japan gets very cold in the wintertime too. How do they do it? Well, they make these big communal globular stick nests. And they love to build them on top of electrical transformers for the warmth. So if they can find food in the wintertime, they can survive. They're obviously very, very cold hardy. So they were first found breeding in a little bit east of the city of San Diego, and now I think they're also routinely reported, and there's a eBird breeding report from, I think, the Tijuana River Valley. These are successively, they're not, the recordings are, as you can see, successively from Florida and Arizona. You will occasionally see other birds wandering in the wild, other parrots, and these are, let's just say, the more popular a cage bird is, the more likely you are to see them in the wild. I have seen each of these in LA County. They're from Australia, or at least the Australian plateau, if you will, the adjacent islands. You do see them, but they tend not to survive. And I used to wonder about that. And turns out that Australia has prohibited the export of wild-caught parrots, maybe even all wild-caught birds, since 1982. So all of the birds that you're likely to see, are almost all, have been raised in an aviary. And if you follow the literature on domestication, one of the traits that tends to evolve under domestication is tameness, a lack of wariness. Well, this does not do a bird any favors if it escapes and tries to survive in the wild. So I suspect that that's the reason that most of these, I've never encountered one more than once, and there's certainly no naturalized population in Southern California. And my understanding that a formerly naturalized populations of budgerigger in Florida has pretty well died out by now too. I could be wrong, check me on that, but that's my impression. So I want to thank specifically Frank and Susan Gilliland for helping me out with some of the technical aspects of Zoom. I've mentioned Mike Bowles and Loretta Erickson. I really am in debt to them for a lot of the photographs I've used tonight. And I also want to thank most of you out there. I think all of you out there, for one, contributing to eBird, many of you out there for contributing to Zeno Canto, and also many of you out there who participated in any of the breeding bird atlas projects in the late 20th century, and hopefully participate in an upcoming atlas project in LA County starting soon. The references will be online. With that, I'm available for questions. So Mark or Ron?
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
That was fantastic. We've had lots of comments and lots of questions come through. But before we get to that, Kimball did mention that the largest monk parakeet population in California is in Calexico in the Imperial Valley. Just to let everyone
Campbell
know that.
Didn't know that.
Oh, great.
And Mark?
Great. So we have a bunch of questions. The first is by Ken, who asks, is there any truth to a story of parrots being released during a fire at a Pasadena pet store in the 50s or early 60s?
I don't know the answer to that. Nobody knows the answer to that. By the way, there was a pet store on fire in Bel Air, I understand, and a similar pet store on fire in Malibu, I was told. So there's a lot of pet store fire stories. I don't know the answer. I have not run into anybody that actually has an answer. No newspaper clippings or anything like that. So I can't help you, Ken. Sorry.
They're probably all true.
All true or all urban legends.
Yes.
Great. So you mentioned about vocalizations being learned, and so Ken asks, is there any evidence that the naturalized parrots have indeed altered their vocalizations from those of the populations in their home country?
I'm not sure that's been studied, Ken. I don't personally know of any data one way or another. It would involve, there are a lot of recordings on Zeno Canto. We're talking in some cases hundreds, and also at the Macaulay Library at Cornell, also hundreds of some of these species. And it would involve going through those, compiling some kind of metric to describe them, and then recording a bunch of naturalized parrots, and then applying that metric to see how close or how far removed. And Ken, another question I can't answer.
No, that's interesting, and another reason to go out and start recording birds. And if you want to know about recording birds, by the way, we have previous webinars you could look up where Lance gave webinars on how to do audio recordings. Okay. Next question is by Steve. How common are parrots with no feathers on the neck or head? He had one in Temple City this evening.
I would think it'd be very uncommon. Without feathers on the neck or head, it's going to lose thermal energy real fast. And birds in general run a lot hotter than people, like around 100 Fahrenheit or so. And if they don't have that feathering as insulation, they're going to lose heat really rapidly. So one, I've never seen such a thing, so it can't be all that common. And two, they might not last very long in any event, but that's a speculation on my part.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Ken. This another interesting thing here. If all you can see is the head and I guess you're trying to determine whether it's a parrot or a parakeet. Are the seers partially covered by feathers the key to determining that?
It's so hard to discern seer colors when they're when these birds are up in trees sometimes. So I would just look at the pattern of other colors around the color on the head, and you don't really need to know whether it's a parrot or a parakeet because the pattern of colors in some of the birds that are naturalized here, they're sufficiently different. There shouldn't be a problem in telling them apart. But and I did not point out, I think, that the red, both in red masks and certainly in mitered parakeets, the area of red just above the seer is a little bit darker than the balance of the red. I should have pointed that out. But in any event, the seer color is really, really hard to discern in the field.
Right.
And digital photography has really helped in those kinds of diagnoses.
Right, but I think he says, is a seer actually covered by feathers in parakeets?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood
Okay.
the question. No, I don't believe
Okay. Okay, great. Scott asks, how do the scant number of cavities that are available support the huge number of parrots in our area?
Well, I think there are more cavities than you can you would ordinarily think of. A lot of street trees, especially in the older neighborhoods, have been trimmed, and every time they trim it, they leave a stub or just the beginnings of a knot hole, and these rot relatively quickly, and the parrots can actually excavate the softer wood that's starting to decay, and even some of the harder wood around it. They can't excavate like a woodpecker starting at a bare a solid branch or a solid piece of bark. But if they've got any kind of a way of excavating, they can. Also, they can use some of the more developed palm tree skirts as nesting cavities, and the smaller parakeets, the parakeets like mitered and red mask often will burrow into the cut off frond bases of date palms. When they're cut, you still have a good 6 inches between the end of the frond and the beginning of the really solid trunk on the date palm, and they'll burrow into that and take a right angle when they hit something hard, and then make a little cavity for themselves there. So they can make their own cavities, but I suspect also there's more cavities around than you might think, because they're kind of high up in trees. The cavities might indeed be almost vertical, in which case they trap water and decay even faster. The wood decay even faster. So I think there are more cavities around than we think there are.
Okay. Right. And how long do they live, by the way, to the naturalized crown parrot?
Yeah, parrots. I have not seen any data on wild parrots or even naturalized parrots, but you often hear numbers like 50 and 60 years for the larger parrots, and I think even the small quote unquote parakeets can probably live 30 years. That's the number that kind of sticks in my mind. I'd have to look that up, but they're pretty long-lived birds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have a question from the YouTube live stream by Eric Marking. Why is there a gap between LA and San Diego populations? Did they escape in San Diego separately, and Los Angeles separately, or is there some habitat difference in Orange County that they don't like, etc.?
Have you heard of Camp Pendleton? It's a big Marine Corps base which stretches along the coast and pretty far inland from south of Dana Point, or what's the next town south of that? San Clemente all the way down to northern Orange, San Diego County. So one, there is a barrier to that where you don't have a lot of introduced trees. And secondly, it could be that there are separate introduction events, because you'll notice that some of the birds are much more common in San Diego County than they are in LA County, and the reverse is also true. So I suspect there are separate introduction events. Parrots, on the other hand, are very used to foraging very widely in their native ranges. They will go from breeding in one area to a wintering area hundreds of kilometers away. And so it wouldn't surprise me that you get the occasional commuter that leaves LA, would probably be a small flock, leaving LA and getting down to San Diego. But I wouldn't exclude, don't think there's any reason to exclude separate introductions as well.
Yeah, and Barbara comments that Oceanside and Carlsbad also have parrots. So there are some.
That is true. Yeah, that's true. I couldn't map every occurrence, but that is absolutely true.
Lance asks, what's the latest on evidence for lilac crown parrots breeding on Mount Wilson? We've seen and heard either lilac crown or red crown flying up and down Big San Anita Canyon many times before the Bobcat fire.
Yeah, I don't have any evidence from Mount Wilson since the Atlas period, and we're talking 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when Larry Webster gave us a few reports up there. It would not surprise me that they're still there. I think people have not been looking for them. So it doesn't surprise me they would be. These would probably be lilac crowns. They were the ones being reported from Mount Wilson during the Atlas period. And my impression is they're more likely to be up against in the montane areas, up against at least above the foothills. But don't know, I don't have any data, and that would be a real good question to start pursuing once am I giving away, telling tales out of school? If we can get another Atlas project going, it would be a great thing to pursue. Thank you, Lance, for helping me push that project.
Great, thank you. Lily asks, is there any possibility of the parrots being invasive? I'm not sure if means,
yeah, well, Lily, we talk about invasive. It's a morally laden term for something you don't like. And parrots indeed are considered invasive by the California Department of Agriculture, just like certain other birds like red-whiskered bulbuls were considered invasive, and the Agriculture Department tried to wipe them out in the 60s. And I know in Bakersfield, there's been a lot of, or at least a certain amount of concern by the farming interests that the rose-ringed parakeets up in Bakersfield will become agricultural pests. And so they will then be called invasive instead of naturalized. But as far as the biology goes, I'm not sure there's a lot of difference in that, Lily, but thanks for asking that question, because you can see how the application of certain words will change one's attitude toward what's out there in the big world.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. Nancy asks, why do mitered parakeets fly north early in the morning and return to the roost close to shore at the end of the day?
Well, generally, the flocks roost where they get the maximum protection against, I assume, both weather and predators. There's a considerable amount of speculation as to the reasoning behind communal roosts, as it were, and that's what they're known as, communal roosts. And then, but they have to go somewhere in the daytime to forage. So if they're routinely going in a certain direction, say north from wherever you are, that means that the food sources are more likely to be found in that direction than other directions. But that's just speculation based upon what we know of their behavior. But I don't have any. Again, it would take a little bit of study to try to figure out precisely what that flock is utilizing at any particular time, and they would vary over the course of the year. And they can find a fruit tree or something, which they might spend 2 days completely denuding. Then they'll go find another tree, and it might be a different direction. So, but they are definitely pursuing food when they leave the roost.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Lance has another question. What are the most common parrots in the San Francisco Bay Area?
Lance, I don't know. I didn't really have time to get into that. I noticed that when I was pursuing eBird, there would occasionally be dots up in the Bay Area, but other than the red mask parakeets, I don't know what else is up there. I'm sure there are some of the big Amazons up there, but I just don't know what they are.
Okay. Lily has a question. Besides red-crowned parrots, which of the parrots are considered endangered, presumably in their native area?
In their native. Red-crowned parrot is the only one that I know that is considered endangered by the subject to the CITES Convention on International Trade in Endangered Animals, species rather. So it's the only one that I know is listed. I'm sure there are others that are considered vulnerable or something like that, but that's the only endangered one I know is the red-crowned parrot.
Okay, thank you. I think we are out of questions.
Yeah, I'm browsing through chat also, and I think we're chatted out.
And we're chatted out.
Okay, well, once again, thank you all for joining me this evening. This has been a real learning experience putting it together. It's been great fun presenting it too. So thank you all.
Well, and thank you so much
Thank you very much
for presenting.
A lot of hard work. Thank you.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's lucky enough to be on the walk for Saturday, fantastic. You've received confirmation with the information. If not, then I'm sure we'll have other parrot chases in the future. So please keep your eyes peeled. Ugh, that hurts.
Eyes peeled and ears peeled.
Your eyes. Anyways, but yes, thank you very, very much, Larry. We really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.
And with that, we'll see you all on November 30th for Alvaro's talk on the big gulls. And take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right, take care.
Bye. Thanks again, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.